You don't talk much, but your mind never shuts up. You're the one who picks up on things others miss. You sense tension in a room before anyone says a word. You hear what people don't say. You notice the cracks behind their smiles, and it exhausts you. Because you're not just living your own life, you're carrying the emotional static of everyone else's. You've always felt different, not broken, not better, just separate. Like you were watching life happen through a thick glass wall. People call you quiet, but you're not empty. You're full of insight, of questions, of knowing. But the more you see, the harder it is to speak. Because how do you explain what you feel when no one else even notices? So you go silent, you retreat, you keep your truth folded inside your chest, hoping someday someone might understand it without you having to translate. But here's the problem. You're not just hiding from the world, you're starting to hide from yourself. And Carl Jung knew exactly where that leads. You never asked to be sensitive. You never asked to feel things this deeply, but it's who you are. You can't unfeel it. You've always been more attuned to what's not being said than what is. And while other people chase distractions, you chase patterns. You notice the shift in someone's tone. You catch the way someone's eyes darken when they lie. You feel the weight of a room the second you walk into it. It's not magic, it's perception, it's depth. It's the burden and the blessing of being an intuitive introvert. Because when you live that deep, the surface world starts to feel fake. Conversations feel shallow. Small talk feels like drowning. Crowds feel like static. Performative positivity feels like betrayal. So you pull back, you protect your energy, you stay quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because no one else seems ready to hear it. And you wonder if you're the problem. Maybe you were the sensitive one in a loud family. Maybe you were the daydreamer in a classroom full of noise. Maybe you were told, you're too emotional. Stop overthinking. Just be normal. So you tried. You numbed your instincts. You silenced your intuition. You laughed when you didn't feel like laughing. You stayed in conversations that made your skin crawl, just to be polite. And with every act of pretending, you learned something dangerous. That your inner world wasn't safe here. That your truth had to be hidden to be accepted. That if you wanted connection, you had to leave yourself behind. And the more you did that, the more invisible you became, even to yourself. Jung would call this the beginning of the false self, the mask, the persona, the part of you designed to be liked, while the real you waits in the shadows. Carl Jung didn't see intuitive introverts as weak. He saw them as essential. To Jung, the intuitive introvert isn't someone who hides. They're someone who sees. They walk between worlds. The outer world of structure and performance. The inner world of symbols, patterns, feeling, knowing. They don't just analyze. They feel truth. They sense energy. They perceive potential. And that makes them dangerous to the status quo. Because they don't fall for appearances. They question, they observe, they see the cracks in the system, they know when something is off, even if they can't yet prove it. Jung believed that intuitive introverts often carry what he called the seed of the future, a vision not yet understood by the culture around them. That's why they feel out of place, not because they're flawed, but because they're early. But here's where it gets dangerous. When your insight isn't seen, it turns into isolation. When your intuition isn't mirrored, it turns into self-doubt. When your sensitivity isn't honored, it turns into shame. And slowly, your gift becomes a curse. You start to think, maybe I'm just broken. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe I'm better off alone. So you retreat deeper into your world. You romanticize solitude. Not because it heals, but because it protects. You stop trusting people. You stop sharing your voice. You stop even trying to connect because rejection feels like confirmation. And now, the very thing that makes you powerful, your depth, becomes the reason you feel powerless. This is the intuitive introvert's silent suffering, not being misunderstood by others, but starting to believe that you don't belong at all. You've probably realized this already. The world doesn't reward depth. It rewards confidence, speed, surface charm, certainty. You watch louder, shallower people get picked for roles you could do in your sleep. You see influencers repeat half-truths while your insights collect dust in silence. You stay quiet in rooms where you know you could lead, but you're too tired to explain the why behind your truth. And you wonder, should I just fake it? Should I just act confident, get louder, become like them? But something in you can't, because your conscience is too loud, because you'd rather be real than be liked, because you're allergic to pretending. That's not weakness, that's integrity. And while it doesn't pay off quickly, it will. Because people like you carry what the world doesn't know it's starving for. Not noise, not perfection, but depth, but stillness, but truth. But here's the part most intuitive introverts never hear. You're not just here to observe the world, you're here to shape it. Now we'll explore Jung's advice for claiming your power, not by changing who you are, but by becoming more of it. You don't need to get louder, you need to get real. Intuitive introverts are gifted at reframing pain as meaning. You feel rejection and call it solitude. You feel avoidance and call it boundaries. You feel fear and call it intuition. And yes, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes your inner world isn't wisdom. It's a fortress, a beautifully decorated one, with language that sounds deep and practices that look conscious. But underneath, avoidance. Jung warned against this, the tendency to spiritualize our defenses. He saw it in patients who spoke of being above it all, when really they were terrified of being hurt again. He saw it in thinkers who spoke of soul, archetype, myth, but couldn't hold a vulnerable conversation with someone they loved. This is the shadow of the intuitive introvert, not just hiding from the world, but hiding within yourself, calling it wisdom, while slowly disconnecting from everything real. You say you're fine alone, but some nights you stare at your phone with no one to text. You crave conversation, not with everyone, just with someone who gets it. You don't need noise, you need resonance. But you've been misunderstood for so long, you've stopped trying. So you wear your isolation like armor. You tell yourself you don't need anyone, that being unseen is a blessing, that connection is a distraction. But is it? Or are you just tired of being the only one in the room who sees? Jung would say this isn't strength, it's shadow protection, because real solitude nourishes, but fake solitude, the kind that's rooted in fear, resignation, or secret bitterness, that's slow spiritual starvation. You're not alone because you're broken. You're alone because you've outgrown small talk, and you haven't yet learned how to speak your depth out loud. You're good at disappearing. You can walk into a room and become part of the wall. You observe, you process, you store what matters, and when the moment is right, you could speak something that shifts the entire dynamic, but you don't. You stay silent. Not because you're shy, but because your insight feels fragile, because you've been dismissed before, because the world doesn't reward nuance. It rewards sound bites. So you say nothing, and another moment passes, another shallow idea wins. Another fool gets celebrated for saying what everyone wants to hear, and you carry the weight of what you didn't say. Again. This is how intuitive introverts disappear, not all at once, but gradually, by withholding truth until even they forget how to speak it. Jung believed that silence, when chronic, becomes a prison, because if you don't express your inner world, it begins to consume you, and eventually you're not protecting your depth, you're burying it. You've been called sensitive, weird, dramatic, complicated. Maybe you even started to believe it. You wondered why you couldn't just chill, why small talk gives you migraines, why you get drained by conversations that other people seem to enjoy. But here's the truth. You're not too much. You're just living in a world that was built for shallow interactions, for fast answers, for certainty over nuance, for ego over essence. And when you bring real perception into that space, of course it feels overwhelming. You're the only one hearing the music while everyone else is dancing to noise. Jung would call this a sign of individuation, the beginning of a deeper self, not a problem to fix, but a path to walk, the path of owning your truth, even when no one echoes it back, the path of becoming real, even if it costs you comfort, the path of seeing clearly, even when the rest of the world calls it overthinking. You don't need to shrink, you need to root. Here's the challenge. How do you hold your depth without drowning in it? How do you protect your inner world without isolating inside it? Jung's answer wasn't to get louder, it was to get clearer. Start with this. Stop waiting for the perfect listener. Your truth doesn't need perfect conditions to be spoken, it just needs to be practiced. Say one honest thing a day. Not big, not dramatic, just real. Share an insight, even if it lands flat. Speak a boundary, even if your voice shakes. Say no without justifying. Say yes without apologizing. Don't perform your depth. Don't hide it either. Live it, like breath, gradually, honestly, in rhythm with your soul. This is what Jung called integration, bringing the unconscious into consciousness through embodied action. Not concepts, not daydreams, not theory, but daily courage. But where does all this lead? What happens when you finally stop hiding? As a next step of our journey, we'll explore Jung's radical challenge to the intuitive introvert. Not to escape the world, but to re-enter it. Not as a performer, not as a mask, but as your whole self, sharp, sensitive, and finally seen. Maybe they misunderstood you. Maybe they mocked your silence. Maybe they rolled their eyes when you finally spoke. But here's the truth. They don't get to decide who you are. Not your family, not your peers, not the culture built for performers. Jung believed that every soul carries a blueprint, an inner pattern waiting to unfold. Not everyone will see it. Not everyone will understand it. But that doesn't mean it's not real. You're not here to meet their expectations. You're here to embody your pattern. And if that means being quiet in a loud world, so be it. If that means being deep in a shallow culture, so be it. If that means being misunderstood before you're appreciated, so be it. Because yourself is not up for negotiation, it's up for integration. You've been acting like you're just visiting, like the world belongs to everyone else, and you're just passing through quietly, respectfully, without making a mess. You wait for others to speak first. You apologize before you've done anything wrong. You shrink to make others comfortable. But here's what Jung would say. You're not a guest here. You're a soul with a task. You don't owe the world politeness if it costs you presence. You don't owe the crowd simplicity if you were born to speak complexity. You don't owe anyone your disappearance. You belong here, and the more you act like it, the more the world adjusts around your truth. You've been told power is loud, that it looks like dominance, charisma, confidence. But for people like you, power is different. It's not in performance. It's in presence. It's in stillness that makes people pay attention. It's in silence that carries weight. It's in insights that make people stop. Not because you yelled, but because you felt. You don't have to become like them. You just have to stop apologizing for being you. You don't need a stage. You need self-trust. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You need to be recognized by yourself. That's where your real power begins, when your own inner gaze replaces the need for external validation. Jung believed the self, your whole integrated being, doesn't rise through mimicry. It rises through ownership. You've been trying to fix what's right with you, your sensitivity, your intuition, your quiet nature. You've been measuring it against extroverted norms. You've been treating your nervous system like a flaw. You've been trying to outrun the very qualities that make you who you are. But Jung would tell you, stop. You don't need to escape your gift. You need to wield it. Sensitivity is not fragility, it's perception. Intuition is not imagination, it's pattern recognition. Silence is not emptiness, it's alignment. What drains you isn't your nature, it's your suppression of it. You keep trying to act like everyone else, and it's killing your signal. You're not here to be more normal, you're here to be more you. So what does it look like to live your truth without apology? It's not glamorous, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, it's quiet power, clear numbers, honest yeses, eyes that don't flinch, a presence that can't be manipulated. You're not waiting to be invited, you're creating space. You're not pushing to be heard, you're speaking with gravity. And the people who resonate, they come closer. The ones who don't, they fall away. That's how your world becomes real. That's how your life becomes yours. You don't need more followers. You need more inner fidelity, the discipline to stand in your truth, even if no one claps. That's what individuation looks like. Not noise, but soul. You've always felt like you didn't quite fit. Not in the classroom, not in the family, not in the flow of small talk and surface roles. But what if that wasn't a flaw in you, but a signal? What if you weren't left out? You were sent ahead, not to follow the path, but to build one. Jung believed that those who feel like outsiders are often carrying something the world hasn't named yet. A way of thinking, a way of feeling, a way of being that doesn't match what came before. And of course that's lonely, of course it's strange. But it's also sacred, because someone has to step outside the norm to create what's next. You weren't rejected, you were redirected. Not to a crowd, but to a calling. They told you leadership looks like charisma, like taking space, like commanding attention, but you've led without shouting. You've changed people without touching them. You've healed spaces just by being calm in them. Jung understood this. True leadership, he said, doesn't come from dominance. It comes from alignment. You lead not by overpowering, but by anchoring. Your quiet becomes a mirror. Your insight becomes a compass. Your presence becomes permission for others to slow down, to reflect, to remember who they are. You don't need a megaphone. You just need to stand in your truth and stay. That's leadership too. You've been trained to doubt yourself, to look for proof, to wait for permission, to second-guess the knowing that lives in your body. But intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. And every time you override it, you train yourself to mistrust your deepest guidance. Jung didn't see intuition as mystical fluff. He saw it as a fundamental part of the psyche, a way the unconscious communicates what the conscious can't yet explain. So if your gut tells you it's off, listen. If your body contracts, pause. If your energy shifts, pay attention. Stop apologizing for having an antenna. Start using it. You'll be told you're behind, that you're missing out, that you need to move faster, decide quicker, speak sooner. But your timing is not their timing. You're not late. You're unfolding. And unfolding takes trust, because purpose doesn't grow in urgency. It grows in alignment. And alignment asks for quiet, for reflection, for listening to the part of you that can't be tracked by clocks or checklists. Let others chase speed. You're here to walk in rhythm with your soul, because what you're building isn't a product, it's a presence, and that can't be rushed. Even when it feels like no one gets it, you are not alone. Others like you exist. They're watching, listening, carving their quiet path through a loud world. They might not post about it. They might not be loud either, but they're here. And one day, your clarity will cross paths with theirs. Not as noise, not as performance, but as resonance. You are not the only one who feels too much. You are not the only one who sees past the surface. You are part of a silent constellation. You're not here to fit. You're here to light up, one truth at a time. So if you've spent years wondering where you belong, if you've questioned your depth, if you've been told you're too quiet, too intense, too different, let this be your challenge. Stop performing clarity. Start living it. Don't water yourself down to be digested. Don't disappear just to make others feel big. And don't betray your own knowing just because no one else can see what you see. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs people like you, clear, calm, courageous, speaking from the center. So begin now, not with a performance, with presence, with one real word, with one deep breath, with one small moment of choosing yourself all the way. Because when you do that, everything changes. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.